Hello and welcome everybody to our EdNet forum. This is an educational network forum, and it's the Charter's way of experiencing new philosophies, pedagogies, and methodologies of education as they are in practice today. Our intention in offering the forum is to cover relevant topics from conception of a child to parenting to exploring the continual timeline of learning at the end of life. These sessions take place on the third Thursday of each month. And on this occasion, we decided to repeat this one because they are usually on Thursdays at 7:30 a.m. This is a repeat that we're doing since we consider it very valuable to our community. And I'd like to introduce Kayla Holland from Break Free Education and her presentation advocating for justice-involved youth, disrupting the school to prison pipeline. And Dr. Kayla is passionate about empowering educators through the professional development, one-on-one coaching, and innovative lesson design. She's driven by a passion for education, consistently explores innovative methods to empower education and champion student-centered classrooms. She holds a doctorate of education and instructional design and technology, and she is also she's got so much to tell us that I won't go on because I want her to tell us more about this. But this session will highlight the education inside the juvenile justice system, and it's absolutely mind-blowing all that happens in there and all that can be done still. So without much more of an ado, I think, Kayla, the stage is yours, and please go ahead with your presentation. And thank you, everybody,
Excellent.
for being here today.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to share. And so, like you said, my presentation today is going to be about advocating for justice-involved youth. And so you've already done a great job at explaining who I am, but my name is Kayla Holland, and I am the Director of Instructional Technology and Blended Learning for a nonprofit in the US called Break Free Education. And today I want to talk about kind of three paths or three buckets of learning in and around justice-involved youth. So I want to tell you who we are as Break Free Education and share some of the work that we're doing. I want to talk to you about secure schools, which is what the education is involved in inside of juvenile justice facilities in the United States. We call them secure schools. So this is going to give you a little peek inside what's happening in juvenile justice spaces in terms of educating our justice-involved youth. And then I want to talk about how you can impact the school to prison pipeline. And I know this is a global audience, so a lot of the pipeline that I'm referring to is specifically in the US, but a lot of this you can modify and transition to your own classroom because it talks about just disciplinary structures and creating spaces for belonging for all of our students. So it really can be a global audience as well. So this kind of in a true teacher fashion, this is my small agenda for today. And I'm so grateful that you're all here. If you have any questions as we go throughout, please place them in the chat if you're here with us on Zoom Live, or place them in the chat wherever you're watching. I think we're streaming on social media channels as well. And we're going to hold space for questions at the end. But Merida, if you feel like there's an important question as I'm going along that you feel like needs to be answered in the moment, please just shout it out at me. I'm very informal in terms of workshops. You have to be in the juvenile justice space. You have to be super flexible and able to kind of change on a moment's notice. So please feel free to unmute and interact with me as much as possible. So I'm with Break Free Education, and I want to make sure everyone kind of knows where we're coming from. So Break Free Education is a small nonprofit in the US, and our mission is to radically improve education in the juvenile justice space. And we really try to do that by investing in the potential and dignity of all of its students. We try to help educators working in these spaces really create active learning environments that are going to be relevant, meaningful, and engaging for the students in their care. And we do that in a lot of ways. When I say small, there's 6 of us who work for Break Free full time. So we consider ourselves small but mighty. We do our work in a lot of different ways, but you can kind of put them into three different buckets. We partner directly with juvenile justice agencies. So that involves me providing professional development training for teachers, or my colleagues, we create resources and build networks of people in similar roles, to connect together to make education relevant and meaningful, but also to break down the silos that exist, because a lot of these facilities are in a very rural town. There's one English teacher or one math teacher working in this very unique space. And so we try to break down the isolation they feel by connecting them to other teachers in their subject area. We also develop high quality educational programs, and you're gonna see some student examples of that today. We're very proud of our initiatives and the student work that comes in. So I love to amplify our student voices. But we create these programs as exemplars of what's possible in these highly restricted spaces. And then we shape, we work with policymakers to really shape the world we want to see, for the justice involved youth in terms of their education. We work across the United States. We are in a lot of different states right now. So, like I said, small but mighty. And then one of the ways I'm going to share two specific examples. So, one of the ways we develop the high quality curriculum I was talking about are these monthly initiatives. And we come out with an initiative per month, August through May, which is a traditional school year in the US. Every single year, there's a specific initiative for each month. And these initiatives are really easy for juvenile justice educators to kind of download from the internet and put into their classrooms. They are aligned to curriculum standards. They are based on the four core subject areas, and they end in a contest. They end in a product being built by students that they then submit back to us at Break Free as a national contest. And we either give feedback internally, or we connect them to an expert in the field for whichever initiative it is to provide feedback. Because as you'll see throughout this presentation, we believe in kids creating things, applying their knowledge to projects they're creating in the classroom. So we love these. We get a lot of students submitted content through these. We just wrapped up Unworldly in October, which is our creative writing exploration. So I've been reading lots and lots of student submissions, and they're just incredible. Our kids are so creative. In the Unworldly initiative specifically, they looked at journalism and what it means to be a creative writer, and the specifics of writing, and they built their own Martian colony. They designed their own Martian colony and created a class-wide newspaper. So there was a lot of collaboration happening with students, and students really learning the writing structure. And then they submit them to us, and we provide feedback and choose a winner. So kids are just super creative, and we love, creating these and sending these out for our juvenile justice educators as examples of what is possible in the classroom. What you'll notice as we go through some of these, I've got some examples to show you, is that a lot of them use paper, cardboard, and tape, because these spaces have very high restrictions on what kind of materials are allowed. And so those are usually what's easy to get in. And then, like I shared, we want to build a community around educators who are often isolated in these facilities. And so we just launched a month ago something we call Break Free Base. This is our online community built just for juvenile justice educators, and we're very proud of it. So an English teacher in a very rural, city, teaching in their facility can connect with another English teacher and really bond over how to make education happen in the juvenile justice space. So we're really excited about this. If you are working in juvenile justice education, then this community is definitely for you. So please join us on Break Free Base. That's just a little bit about who we are. We work with a lot of different facilities, educational agencies. They can be statewide, they can be small county facilities that are connected to the local schools. They can be run by full state agencies. They can be run by small nonprofits, in terms of who runs the education inside these secure schools. And that makes it very difficult, but we do have kind of a national perspective on what's happening in secure schools across the US. So I want to make sure we kind of explain a little bit about what a secure school is, and then jump into how education is functioning. And I want to make sure we also understand, I don't want to like paint this beautiful picture that just amazing, creative, wonderful things are happening in every single facility, across the US. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement, a lot of places where, education is not happening, a lot of facilities where, kids are not treated well. And so there's definitely that conversation we can have. But for today specifically, I do want to highlight a lot of the positives that are happening, because there's incredible teachers out there working in secure schools that are just making these innovative spaces, thrive. So just so we're all on the same page, a secure school, which is what I will say often, are educational programs located specifically in juvenile justice facilities across the United States. And they can be in kind of two different paths, this pre-adjudication versus post-adjudication. And pre-adjudication is really kind of a pre-trial. You can consider it short-term facility. So kids might be there from 3 days to 9 months or something like that. It depends on each student. It's a transient population. Versus post-adjudication, which is pre-adjudication is pre-trial. So they've been arrested for something and they're waiting trial. That's why the time frame is a bit all over the place. Versus post is they've been to trial, they've potentially been sentenced, and they're serving out, a year, 2 years, 3 years, could be a couple of months even in those spaces as well. So the general number is about 700,000 students go through the system each year in both of those pre and post adjudicated spaces. That number is really hard to nail down something specific because data is just really hard to get out of all of these facilities across the US. But the general number is that 43,000 students are in some type of long-term facility. What we do know is that the average student age is basically a 15-year-old male, but the age range is about 10 to 24. But our average age student is a 15-year-old. There's a high majority of boys versus girls inside of these secure schools. And then how we get these numbers, and this is why sometimes the data isn't, super specific. A lot of the data comes from what they consider a one-day count, and I think it happens usually in October. The government says, "Hey, what's your count today?" And so that's the number that kind of gets spread around. But as you'll see from our sentencing project chart here, it really just grossly understates how many students are actually in the system. So from this 2019 chart, which is our most recent data, which is sad in of itself that it's 2024 and our most recent data is coming from several years ago. This says, that 36,000 kids were part of that one-day count, but in general, over 2008, 208,000 youth spent at least one night detained in 2019. So we're not counting 80% of our incarcerated youth in that one-day count. And so that's where it's really difficult to kind of get accurate data to paint that picture of how many students are actually affected by the justice system. We see numbers like 208,000 in 2019 versus 700,000, post-pandemic numbers. So it's really all over the place in terms of data. So it's very difficult to be able to get accurate counts. So now let's chat a bit about what does a typical day look like in an educational secure school. And a lot of these spaces, it looks like what you would expect in a traditional, public school. Kids come to school at 8 a.m. in most places. They have first period, second period, third period, things like that. Or it's like a one-room schoolhouse in a lot of places where they're in one classroom all day and teachers are coming to them, or there's one teacher specifically if it's a small facility. But what's different is that inside of these facilities, there's a lot of restrictions that teachers must adhere to. And so these restrictions can be based off movement. So students really aren't allowed to move freely. Officers will bring them to the educational unit from their living pod. And in a lot of places, once they're sitting in their concrete desk or whatever desk is provided, they're not allowed to move without permission. And if they are moved, A lot of students are then searched and things like that. So movement is highly restricted. Materials are often restricted. A lot of spaces are making education happen with just a pencil and paper. Some places can have technology, but if they do have technology, then it's also highly restricted. So you have, for example, the internet itself is not wide open. You can only access maybe the Google Workspace for Education products like slides, docs, sheets, that kind of thing. Or maybe there's 10 websites that are on the allow list that kids can get to. So technology, even if it's allowed, is highly restricted. So restrictions play a big part in how educators make something happen. So think about your own classroom right now, if you're an educator, and think about your favorite project, and maybe like count up in your head, if it's a technology project, how many links are involved, how many websites do you send them to, 3 different websites to get access to something, or do you send them to Google Classroom versus 3 other things. Just think about how many websites they're accessing, and then think about, if you're doing something in the classroom in terms of a project, how many actual materials are used. And then strip all of that away and try to decide, how can you make that same project happen with no access to technology and no access to materials beyond a pencil and paper. So, it's just, you can understand a little bit, if you're an educator, how these restrictions play into building a lesson. Another thing that makes the secure schools unique is that there's constant change in terms of who is in the classroom. So, like I said, these are highly transient populations, especially in the short term facilities. So, as a teacher, every day could be different. You could have 10 students today, 8 students tomorrow, 12 students the next day. Some students might be not in your classroom because they've been released, and they're released, almost without warning. Some students may be in court, some students might be in medical, but there's just constant change. So you have to really be flexible in what you're teaching and how you're planning. And as educators, you know that who is in your classroom determines the kind of attitude balance, right, that exists inside of these classrooms. So if you're really engaged, interested student isn't there, what does the balance look like of students left in the classroom? So there's all these things you have to really constantly be shifting. But then, despite all of that, honestly, the largest issue that teachers have educating inside a secure school is that most of their students are coming to them based off the living pod that they have been assigned to, and not necessarily their grade level. So in a secure school, you have the education team, and then you have the facility team. And the facility team places students in their living pod based off safety or security, right? So you have to consider things like gang affiliation, or if students know each other from the outside, they can't be placed together. So what that means is the living pod then might have 15 students in it, and they range from ages 12 to 17. And that whole living pod comes to class together. So when you're teaching any of your core subject areas, you're then teaching all of those 15 students ranging in ages from 12 to 17 at the same time. So that's going to be almost 4 different grade levels. Even math and science is 3 different subject areas at once. It's really difficult for educators to put all of those into the same classroom and then actually teach all of them at those different levels. There's a big discussion we can have based on, is a 9th grade student really at a 9th grade learning level? And, the reading level could be a lot lower, things like that. And I think that also resonates with teachers in a traditional public school. You might all have 10th grade students, all 30 in your classroom are 10th grade students, but are they all actually at a 10th grade learning level? So I think that's where you could relate a little bit to so the teachers in the secure school. So despite all of those things making it really difficult for teachers in the juvenile justice space, there's a lot of really great things happening in terms of innovative experiences for kids. And we at Break Free really believe in products and authentic audiences. And if you're a juvenile justice educator and you've been to any of my workshops, I have talked about this nonstop, because I truly believe in active learning experiences. And I believe that in spite of all the restrictions in place, we can create these innovative, highly engaging, really active learning experiences for students in these classrooms. And we do that by connecting real products with authentic audiences. And this is really what that means. It's that students are applying what they're learning in some type of project at the end of the lesson. And that project, I like to call it a product, is connected to an authentic audience. So those initiatives are really important because we at Break Free become the authentic audience. And so we get to provide feedback. Um, for teachers, for students working in their on their projects. We also can connect them to real experts, but a lot of teachers are doing this without Break Free Connected, which is really what we love to see. And they're creating these authentic audiences through peers or the facility staff, people already allowed into these spaces, experts in the community. They do online initiatives and just other unique places. And we encourage teachers, all people can say is no. So just ask everyone you can think of and see who's going to say yes to providing feedback for students in these facilities to really be that authentic audience. So the classrooms themselves are interesting, and I have a couple of different kind of images for you from some of our facilities. So some spaces look very much like a classroom, but a lot like you can see here, if there are windows, they're high up on the wall, they're covered. So students really can't see outside. So any kind of educational space you can create that is going to allow students to leave their confined space, even mentally, for a little bit is going to be a positive. And really help students engaging in that content. So you can see there's pen and paper here. So how can we really, the big question we ask teachers is how can you create these highly engaging experiences for kids in spite of all of those restrictions and the constant change and the multiple levels at one time. So I wanted to provide amplify some student voices, amplify student work that's been submitted to us, but also share with you some really interesting ways that education is taking place inside of Secure School. So I have a couple of what I consider these foundational elements to share with you, and then we'll kind of end with how do you impact this school to prison pipeline. So one of the first ways that I encourage teachers to create these experiences is to put something relevant into the classroom. You're gonna, and this can either be in a secure school, or you can transition it to your school, your classroom. All of these foundational elements. So to be relevant is to really put something into the classroom that's highly engaging for the students in your classroom itself. So we use the Unsung contest. We ran it for numerous years, and kids could create basically a song. We provided access to Soundtrap for the month of October. We hosted it in October, and kids could create a rap song to go with it. That's relevant for them because they love music. If you ask any student, what is something you love, they're going to name some type of sport or some type of music. That's just where our kind of students are. So we connect that with their love for music. We've done protest songs. The example here you'll see is with the SDGs. So we selected 4 SDGs from the UN Sustainable Development Goals and had them creating songs based off of that. We've connected it to math concepts, and so just really asking students to connect, create a rap song, create some type of music based on a prompt of our choice has really been helpful to create it's something relevant for them. In the middle, we have an example of a book. It's Amber McBride's Me Moth, which is just a fantastic read. But we have a book club where in previous years, we've been able to give, select teachers, they apply through a lottery, and we do 50 to 60 teachers a month get 10 copies of our selected book. And then, we at Break Free create a lot of teacher companion guides, student companion guides to really, push these books into the classroom. But we create the list of books that are given are highly relevant to our students. They're diverse authors, they're diverse protagonists, they represent the kids that are in the classroom. So the easiest way to really bring relevance into your classroom is to make sure all of your materials, all of the authors you're studying really reflect the students in your care. So our students are majority Black and brown. So we want to make sure the books that they're reading and the things that they're studying are really effective and represent Black and brown populations. So we try to make sure we're connecting their cultures into the things that we're studying. That's one of the easiest things you can do in any classroom. And then on the right is our roller coaster competition. And it's really just an example of thinking outside of the box. I got a lot of flack for saying, hey, let's let kids build roller coasters, in this restricted space. But honestly, it's just paper and tape. Some spaces the kids couldn't control the marble, and other spaces they could. And I lived in Haiti for a while, and we called them marble machines, and we built these paper-based roller coasters in Haiti. And so that was a big selling point for me to say, I know this is going to work in the space. Like, let's just try it out. And we have run that Unleashed roller coaster competition for a couple of years now, and it's been so cool. Kids, this example, and these are all hyperlinked when you get access to these slides. This video shows when the marbles caught at the bottom, a tub of confetti drops. I've had other winners where this last year in the spring of 2024, the marble was caught at the bottom and then a little elevator took it to the top. Like, kids are just super creative. And we want to make sure that we're helping them build those products. And then again, you're going to notice a lot of my examples are using cardboard, paper, and tape because that's a lot of what we have access to in the classroom. So another foundational element is engaging. How can you engage students in the learning process? And you can do that by creating products. And you might call them projects at the end of the class, something that builds on your lesson and there's some real large ending that they can apply their learning to. So this is an example of Unconstruct, which is our initiative for design thinking, and we've partnered with various people on this initiative throughout the years we've hosted it. Kids have learned about homeless populations, they've learned about pedestrian safety, and now they're learning about reviving our ocean life. And this year all of our lessons for Unconstruct are about ocean life. We partnered with Diane Malloy. She's an oceanographer. She helped us teach all of the content. And then students are going to go through the design thinking process to create a solution to the problem of reviving our ocean life. And so they'll create a solution out of cardboard once they've designed it. And this image I love because it's a still from a video. And what this facility in Oregon did was pulled all of this is about the homeless population. They pulled all the student projects out into the cafeteria and they let the staff that's already has access in the facility come and basically do like a science project where they got to stand next to it and talk about their design and kind of have an internal facility contest. And the local news picked it up. And so this video is a little bit from that. And it's just really exciting to see, like, if you just try something new, what is possible in your space. And then unrelated to Break Free, on the right are facilities that we partner with in Massachusetts. They have a statewide program. They're run by a nonprofit called Collaborative Educational Services. And they do a food truck and a Shark Tank project every summer. So I think their teachers kind of get a break in the summer and they have summer teaching crew kind of come in and they do 12 weeks of interesting projects. And this is one of them. And I really love the food truck design. There's a little bit of geometry in there. They get to basically work with kids to build these. And then they have a virtual contest. So each facility runs a contest and the winners get to share on this big virtual contest that happens. So the next one is again, these products and authentic audiences. I mean, that is the song I sing everywhere. I truly, really believe in it. But these are all really interesting examples of that. So West Virginia in October, it's the National kind of Youth Justice Awareness Month. And so a lot of our facilities do something to bring awareness to YJAM. And so they had kids write poetry and speeches, and they have a huge kind of arts festival in West Virginia, and they created these art showcases, for lack of a better phrase, with QR codes on them. You can see right here. So this was out in the public. The kids are not in the public, but the public could scan a QR code, leave feedback for these pieces. And these were in shop windows all down the street. That's a big way of saying, here's our student work and here's the way that you can leave feedback. This was last year. They did this again this past October, except they made it virtual. And they curated almost 100 pieces of art, and these artists, these students, had over 500 pieces of feedback left for their specific art. And what a way to engage students in their learning when they've created something and 5 or 6 people are giving feedback for each of these pieces of art. It's a really engaging way for students. In the middle, you'll see is that paper-based roller coaster. So Kentucky said, hey, we love your product idea, this initiative Unleash. Can we use it for a statewide competition? And we said, absolutely. I helped them connect it to their state standards, and they just ran with it. And what's really cool is each facility will compete with itself, and they have one student group be the winner, and then they come in person, which is unheard of in a lot of our juvenile justice spaces. The kids get to leave and come in person to a gym basically, and they have like a science fair project. So you're seeing the judging happening for these 2 kiddos right here. The some of the guards are there, bring in the kids, and they win. There's kind of Kentucky statewide competition. And then on the right here, you see the Aspen Challenge. These are some students in Louisiana, and they submitted to the Aspen Challenge. And I don't know if you know about it, but it's not just for JJ, it's for actually like traditional schools, private schools, anybody can submit. And our kids who are confined in a facility in Louisiana submitted and won the entire thing. And they got a lot of news coverage, and we were really proud of them. We also believe in the creative and performing arts. We believe that kids should learn to express themselves. Thanks, Lucy, for dropping that link in there. We believe that kids should express themselves creatively. A lot of our students have never done art before, have never written a speech before, have never written a poem before. And for a lot of these kids, it's a way to understand their feelings and amplify their voice. They have such impactful stories. And so we want to make sure that we're really amplifying that. I'm going to play an example. I hope this is on YouTube, so I'm hoping there's no ad, but of course there's going to be an ad.
My first year teaching, lesson planning was rough.
We'll just talk
I was
over
spending
it for a
so
second.
much time after.
But this is a student who won our contest.
The reason I wrote this poem
year.
is because I wanted to embrace my culture and my heritage. The name of this poem is The Klamath Tribe by Standing Bear. Walking through Chiloquin, taking in the culture, watching the powwow, smelling the fry bread, and seeing everybody dance to the sound of the drums. Everybody speaks in my native language, E Kaidawa Subkecha. Wearing the gold cross I bought with my mom, my hair braided like my ancestors. My mother gave me my face, my father gave me my anger.
It's just a beautiful poem by Standing Bear, and he had never written poetry before, submitting to this contest. And it's not really about the contest. What's really emotional and important is that the student had never written a poem before and wrote this poem and was so talented in it. He won the contest. He was still there the next year and took second place. And so we reached out to say, hey, you've got some real talent. Why don't you be our judge? So next year in 2025, we run this initiative in April because that's National Poetry Month. So he's going to be our judge, and he's writing a lot of poetry to be his examples. He's picked our theme, and he's going to judge other students' work. And it's been really cool to work with him. On the right, this is unrelated to Break Free. This is a music video from students at a facility, JC Montgomery in California. And they have an entire music program really called Stories with Style. And these kids basically a couple years ago won a song contest, and a local videographer said, hey, we'd love to come and create a music video for you. And so that's what you'll see if you click here, is this kind of 3 to 4 minute video with these students. It's at the facility, and it took a year for them to really get approval to come in and film inside the facility. But it was really cool for kids to be able to see their song in music video form. We've only got a couple more of these. So number 5 is community connections. And this is something that you can relate to even in your own classroom if you're not in the JJ space. How can you connect to someone in the community that can elevate what's happening in your classroom? And so, there's a graduate school in Utah that sends graduate students out to youth facilities for 6 weeks at a time to work. It's called STEM CAP. They do STEM projects and art projects. And that's a great experience for the grad students, and it's a great experience for our kiddos. In the middle in California, there's a facility that the kids were really interested in graffiti art. So they connected with a local graffiti artist who came into the facility. And when they all did their actual graffiti art at the end of this kind of multi-week program, they turned it into stickers, because any image you have, you can turn into stickers. So that's such an easy way. The kids themselves are their authentic audience then, because they get to hold the stickers in their hands. And then one of the cool stories, this is, not typical, but is exciting when it happens, is the music program came into a facility in New Orleans, Louisiana, and just kind of, taught kids a little bit about music production over the course of a couple of weeks. And this kid really connected with music and music production and the company themselves. And so when he was released, he started an internship and has been working with them for the last year. So that's just a really cool, you never know. Again, all you can do is ask and see who says yes. A lot of people might say no, but you don't know if you don't ask. So who can you connect to in your community? Another thing we like to do is acknowledge achievement, but not just academic achievement. And again, this can be in your traditional school, not just a secure school, but it's especially important in our spaces. So we do recognize achievement, like in Pima County, this is what they call a hallway of graduates. And so like the living pods on one side and the education units on the other, and the kids go back and forth, multiple times a day. And whenever you get your high school diploma or your GED, you get your handprints painted up on the wall. And that's important because it recognizes a culture of, academic appreciation. And we want to encourage you to graduate, because having a high school diploma lowers that recidivism rate for students. But we don't want to just acknowledge academic achievement. Our kids come from, backgrounds where maybe they haven't been in school for a couple of years. Maybe school was a really traumatic experience for them. Maybe they didn't feel like they fit in or belonged in school. And so we want to really acknowledge any kind of achievement. So this is an example of a teacher's classroom wall in Missouri. And she shared with me, that she recognizes all kind of achievement. Like, hey, I know this has been a rough day for you. You're having a really great attitude. I know that's hard. I appreciate it. Your name's going up on the wall. Or your handwriting has been really terrible and you're really trying. So like write something, great, and we're going to put it up on the wall. These little forms of acknowledgement matter. And then this is one of my favorite ones, is meaningful. How do we build meaningful relationships with students? Because honestly, in our environments, and especially I think even in a traditional school environment, if you do not build trust with your students, they're going to find it difficult to learn from you, right? It's the Rita Pierson TED Talk, if you've ever seen it. It's called Every Kid Deserves a Champion. And she says kids don't learn from people they don't like. And we're not going to like every kid, but they can never know it, right? So we have to really build these meaningful relationships with students. And I love this image on the left here. It's just, it just shows such trust and respect in these facial expressions. And this is at Maya Angelou Academy in DC. And this picture's a little bit older, but these students are getting ready to share their winning speeches in front of the entire facility. And so they're putting on their button-ups and ties and things to really represent the moment. And then of course, graduation is such a great way to provide that meaningful, you've done it, we're proud of you. And really creating a big graduation moment, because in a traditional school, graduation's every May or June or whatever that looks like. Everybody graduates at the same time. But in a facility, kids might not be there in May. Maybe they're there in January or February. So this facility really wants to make sure they're getting the graduation experience whenever throughout the year they actually finish. And then this isn't so much a foundational element as much as an innovative experience, right? But virtual reality is one of the ways that I've really pushed innovation in these spaces in the last 2 years. We started with this problem of how do we get science concepts, students to really apply science concepts, science experiments in these spaces. Because if you think about material restrictions, I can't get in things like beakers or chemicals or any of that to really create these science experiments. And so virtual reality became a potential solution for us. And I really started piloting some and demoing some programs and testing them in facilities. And we went with this one program that we really loved that worked well for our spaces. And this last year in 2024, I ran it in 10 facilities. And then we're doing another round of this pilot in 2025. So I've been really excited to see kids interact with this program. And it's a little bit like Magic School Bus. You can go inside the human body, you can do a lot of things you wouldn't normally do before. So I've been really excited about that. Okay, so that's a little bit about secure schools. I know that's a lot. I'm throwing a lot at you, but I want to make sure we're painting this accurate picture, right? So those are a lot of positive things that are happening. That doesn't mean they're happening everywhere. And so now let's share a little bit about the impact on this school to prison pipeline. So I have a couple of ways that if you're in the United States, or even if you're in a global global classroom, these are things that you could do in your own classroom to help create these spaces of belonging. But in the United States, I really believe that these are ways we can keep kids out of what we call the school to prison pipeline, because it's a very real thing. And it starts a lot of times in the academic classroom in your public school. So the one thing you can do is build relationships. So if kids are already in the pipeline, how do you build relationships with those students? I had a student tell me once that he was in a facility for 3 to 4 months and then was released back to his public school. A lot of times kids are mandated to return to school. So they have to go every day or they're going to be sent back to their facility. And he said on his first day back, he was searched 17 times in one day. So a lot of this has to do with these structures that are already in place. So when you build relationships, learn about your local system. Where are kids going when they leave your classroom if they're gone for 3 to 4 months at a time? Have a conversation with students. Make sure the student understands whether you're coming back from a facility or they're new to your classroom, that you are an advocate for them, you're an ally, you're providing a safe space for them if they need a break. It can be very overwhelming for our students to be placed back in a public school because they're coming from a place where every single decision was made for them: when to get up, when to shower, when to eat, when to go to school. And one kid described it one time as like decision paralysis. It's like too many things to decide at once, and I get very overwhelmed. That's what he said. So give them a space to kind of, chill out for a minute if they need it. But really just make sure that you're showing them you're their advocate, you're treating them with dignity and respect. But if you want to try to keep kids out of the system, understand that behavior is just communication, even negative behavior. If kids are behaving negatively in your class, they're telling you something. So they're either bored or they're in a situation they're not comfortable or they're angry. There's some type of communication that this behavior is telling you. So how can you really build and maintain relationships with those students? Another thing you can do is recognize your own bias. And I could do a whole other workshop on unconscious bias and how we all have it. I believe that we all have it in some way. But I want to try to be kind of quick here. So basically, I think it was in the 60s, a scientist named Dr. Rosenthal did this study with rats, and he had a bunch of rats and he placed them in 2 cages. One was labeled the smart cage, one was labeled the dumb cage. He had graduates that since come in, and he said, at the end of the week, I want these rats to all finish, the maze that I've created for them. And at the end of the week, every rat in the smart cage finished the maze successfully. Every rat in the dumb cage did not finish the maze successfully, right? And rats cannot read. They didn't know which cage they were in. It was the graduate students, their work with each set of rats that really made the difference. And so they tried this on a group of students in Chicago. And they pulled 100 kids into a room and basically told the teachers, I can show you, we have a new IQ test, I can show you who your academic bloomers are. So they pulled 100 kids into a room, they gave them all a test. They didn't even grade the test at first. They just took 20 random names from those 100 kids and put them to the teachers and said, these are your academic bloomers. And they came back at the end of the year and tested the kids again. And those 20 kids who were listed as the academic bloomers, that they raised their grade on that test by a third, right? The kids never knew what was happening. It was the teachers' reaction to that information. It was the teachers' actions of giving them more challenging material, of really, helping them kind of rise to the level of their expectations. And we do that in so many ways. We have our own biases against kids. And we call kids labels in our minds, even if we don't utter them out loud. And our kids in the JJ system are labeled with lots of things. They're labeled criminal, they're labeled murderer, they're labeled violent, they're labeled troubled, they're labeled bad, but nobody ever labels them students or scholars. So really, what steps can you take to recognize and change that own bias that you're experiencing with students in your care? The next point is to recognize your own impact. And I really truly believe, I've talked to a lot of students in the system, and educators impact every single student they come across, but that impact can either be negative or it can be positive. And I love hearing from students when they tell me positive stories about educators. And a lot of these positive stories from my JJ kids are coming from teachers they've met inside their detention centers, in their secure schools, right? One student even said, jail was the best thing that happened to me because I met Miss So-and-so and she really believes in me and she really cares. But what's a shame is, why do these kids have to make it into the system before they feel like they have a teacher that believes in them? Right? So what is the impact you're making? And I know I'm saying all of this, and I understand that a traditional teacher has, 30 kids in a classroom and you've got 120 kids total. I don't know. There's just, a lot of things on your plate. But we have to try to reach every single kid, and we have to especially try to reach the kids that aren't really being reached by anyone else, right? So look at the kids that are in your care, and think about, what's the impact you're giving them? What needs to change in your own classroom in order to positively impact all of these students? And if you're really interested in diverting this kind of school to prison pipeline, especially in the US, there's an article linked here for you from the Sentencing Project that outlines specific ways to divert kids from the system. And a lot of these diversion tactics are family engagement. How are you engaging with the families of the students in your care? What do we know about school resource officers? I'm going to talk about that in just a second. How do we improve our data collection, right? What do we know about students that are going to our school, and how do we reduce those racial and ethnic disparities? And I would add here, what are our discipline procedures look like? So who controls the discipline in your classroom? I had a school principal of a facility tell me in January that our numbers are about to go up. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Why are your numbers about to go up randomly in January? And he said, well, a lot of these kids have been in school and they've been, acting out negatively, and no one's trying to help them. They just send them out of the classroom. And so at this point of the year, the principals are tired of them getting sent out of the classroom. They send them to alternative schools, and the alternative schools send them almost straight here. It's like this school to prison pipeline. Is that slippery slope. So really look at, where do those discipline procedures take place? Is it in your classroom? Can you change your discipline practices to be more restorative instead of punitive? And then if not, can you look at that at a school level, a school-wide level? What is that? What do those discipline policies look like in your classroom? And then the last one is really these restorative practices. So if you're looking at your own discipline procedures in your classroom or school-wide, what is another path besides these punitive disciplinary measures? And one of them might be, this is a linked article for you about the city that kicked cops out of schools. There's a lot of positive and negative things about school resource officers being in the US school system. Some are really great, some are role models for kids, and others really just criminalize adolescent behavior, in a way. So how can you really rethink punishment in your classroom or your school? And it really, if you can rethink that punishment to make it more restorative, I think that will help us keep a lot of students out of the system. So I know I've gone on a long time, so I'm going to stop and see if we have any questions. But I always like to end workshops with this big list of things that are totally okay, because I typically bring things to people that push the innovation a little bit in whatever space they are. And change can be scary for a lot of people. So I really want to make sure we're saying here that these are things that are okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to take a break or have a bad day, ask for help. or not follow trends or change your mind. It's okay to do a lot of these things. What's not okay is for us to be exactly the same teacher we are today that we were yesterday, or the exact same teacher tomorrow as we are today. We have to constantly be changing and growing because our kids' education and our kids' future depends on it. One of my favorite quotes lately has been Henry David Thoreau, and he says, "It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see." And I'm going to say it again. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. And a lot of people, when they look at our kids in the juvenile justice system, they see a lot of those labels I mentioned earlier. They see criminals, they see bad kids or troubled kids, and I really want them to see scholars and students that are trying to do better for themselves and make a better path for themselves because their lives depend on it, their education depends on it. And I think we as teachers, as JJ teachers, we can really impact the future of these kids, but even public school, traditional school teachers can impact the future of these kids as well. So thanks so much for listening. Again, I'm Kayla and I work with Breakthrough Education. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and take any questions that you might have. But thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful, amazing. The work you do, it really touches my heart and even brings tears to my eyes. Now sometimes when we don't always have the opportunity to see what's happening inside our judicial system. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And so I want to open up the the screen for anybody who would microphone, who anybody would like to comment or have any questions. So Marilyn, I think you have unmuted.
Yeah, I did.
You go.
Kayla, I was wondering, this program is just incredible. Are there opportunities where you can form circles of trust with students, where you have conversations, they might be a cohort, or where they really have an opportunity to talk about themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of our spaces are using restorative practices, and I'm not, trained in restorative practices, so I can't speak to the specifics of it. But I know that it works really well in helping kids learn about their emotions and how to be reactive to their emotions. And I even think like I need to know that like I need to go through the system of restorative practices to learn about my own emotions and how to handle them. But one of the things I really love about restorative practices is they create these trust circles. And so when something happens with the student in a classroom, they basically can pull them out and say, hey, you've lost respect and trust of this teacher, and the teacher has lost the trust and respect of you. We need to have a trust circle and restore those relationships. And so going through that process, which is very clear to students, that's something that in the JJ system, we really need to make sure that whatever we're telling students is going to happen actually happens, because they've lived a life that isn't fair necessarily and that a lot of people have let them down. So we really want to make sure there's a clear process in place. But the restorative practices, if facilities are using them, I think it's been really helpful in helping students just learn about their emotions and just build that trust between teachers and students. And it's really hard. I'm making it sound really easy, and it's not easy in the day-to-day. It can be very difficult for teachers and students to earn that trust in order for kids to really engage with them.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I was a principal in Chicago, and we were 1 block away from a juvenile detention center called Audi. And we accepted, because we negotiated with the director, that we would take 120 of their students. This was a huge facility that they had, and have them come into a regular high school. And it worked. I mean, it was difficult because, as you said, they're coming from, the students from Audi Home were coming from a regulated system into an alternative high school where they were really expected to make their own private choices, and that was difficult for them. And I just wonder, with your group, how much is dictated to you about the kinds of the parameters of what you're teaching versus how much creativity you have to really create your own curriculum?
You know, that's a great question. That's different per state and per facility almost. So there are states, you know, I'm thinking like the state of Maryland and you know, West Virginia and things like that. They, if they're a statewide government program, they function a lot like your local school, county school district will, and there's a curriculum set for them. They're meeting objectives every day. And some of them are even detailed to say, like, you're actually, you know, teaching this content on Monday and this content on Tuesday. And so some teachers are working in a highly strict in terms of what content is considered, which can be good, but can also be negative because our kids aren't coming in at a ninth grade learning level, even if their credits say they're in ninth grade. And so teachers have to be really creative around how we're meeting our curriculum standards, but also helping kids grow. But then it can go to the other extreme as well, where nobody's telling them what they have to cover, and the teachers are able to, you know, create their own curriculum. And there's pros and cons to that. Some teachers are really creative and can create a very rigorous system that meets kids, you know, with each level they are. And some teachers it's overwhelming to do that, and so the learning level is not as great, you know, as the principal would like it to be. So it really, and it's everywhere in between. Each state, each county almost is run differently in terms of who's controlling the education inside these facilities across the US. It can really be quite different.
Thank you. I have a question here is, do you actually train volunteer teachers or do you contract teachers, or if somebody would like to help out somehow, how can they do so?
Yeah, so we at Break Free do not train volunteer teachers, but each facility has their own rules for that. So again, I'd really, if you're in the US, you know, connect with your local facility. Like for me, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's a facility 20 minutes from me, right? So connect with them and see. A lot of them take volunteers, especially if they are going to provide some type of academics. So let's say you want to help kids, you know, do writing, or you want to help teach Spanish, teach English to Spanish speakers, or something like that. A lot of facilities will take volunteers. You have to go through a regular screening process, and a lot of volunteers will say, "I'm going to come, you know, twice a week for 6 weeks and then take a break," kind of thing. But yeah, most facilities are going to take volunteers. So if you're really interested in it, connect with your local facility. If you don't know what that means, just send me an email and we'll try to connect you. You know, I don't have contacts at literally every facility, but Break Free has a contacts at a lot, and so we can try to connect you. But yes, definitely. A lot of the way that these work are the teachers are there from 8 to 3, and at 3 o'clock, like you're out, you've got to leave the facility. And so if you want to come in and do some type of academic volunteer programming in the afternoons, I think a lot of facilities would be very receptive of that.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think we talked about this the last time you presented. One of the projects that the charter is organizing is this Artistic Bridges art project. We're creating books of student artwork in Book Creator, and people can either like make their own book or they can contribute images of their art and we'll put it into a collective book. It's up to you know, individual teachers how they want to proceed, you know, depending on their comfort with Book Creator and that sort of thing. Because you, as you know, you can make a free account with them.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we could collaborate on this, or you could spread the word to other some of the people that you work with in different institutions and see if they want to, or maybe
Yeah.
there's some existing stuff that you have that you'd want to contribute.
Yeah, I think let's definitely, I mean, I can definitely share it out. Like I said, we've got that new online based curriculum. I mean, not curriculum, whew, my brain today, online based community platform. So I can definitely share it out, but I think we should talk about collaborating. We've been chatting internally about what would that look like if we did some kind of online book, where we give teachers a theme. You know, like our Words Unlocked contest had last year was the theme of heritage, or the year before was shapeshift. You know, what would that look like if we gave people a theme? and had them create student art around it in a lot of ways to publish in October and have, bring awareness to the Youth Justice Awareness Month. But yeah,
Yeah.
Lucy, I think we
Yeah.
should definitely talk about I can definitely share that out with our teachers, but talk about collaborating in some way.
It's really an open, ongoing thing. I think we should be a little bit more structured with it in terms of themes, but right now it's whoever wants to create can create whatever they want, really. But
Okay.
we're looking for themes of peace, love, social justice. I don't know,
Yeah.
Marilyn's executive director of the charter, if she hasn't introduced herself yet. And Marilyn, do you want to elaborate on Artistic
Well,
Bridges a bit more?
yeah, I think the idea here is that we look at the arts holistically. And it
Mm,
really hit me, not necessarily with the idea of visual arts as much as hearing that poem by the young
mm,
man from Oregon. I mean, the power of that poem was just extraordinary. And that's the beauty of Artistic Bridges, because these books, we can have MP3s, we can have MP4s, so that, there's just that link where the page
yeah.
becomes alive. And yes, Lucy's right. I mean, we're looking around themes of equity and justice, but also of kindness. And it's almost as if, as you're thinking and sharing with educators in the system, what are they finding might be the themes that are most conducive to bringing about some positive interaction and even hope uh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
in a really difficult situation.
Yeah, one of our there's a woman who works at a college in San Antonio, and she's had a connection with, I think, through Rotary, right?
Mhm.
Through for a doctor that was going to Ukraine. And so this people donated art supplies, and he took them to Ukraine and worked with kids, and they produced their own book. And
Mm,
so it can be dependent on the context. It could be messages that educate people about the experience of justice involved youth. I think, because
yeah,
I think that's kind of a forgotten population. And
it is.
frankly,
Yeah.
in this new era that we're entering, I'm even more worried about how students are going to be supported no matter where they are, right? And given
Yeah.
and because it's pretty grim right now,
Yeah.
as you probably can feel, just online and that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
kind of anything like that would be great, would be awesome. And we could also, we could meet with people if their teachers are interested. We can meet with them and talk them through it and give them some more information. And I think you would find the woman in San Antonio is a nun, and she's full of
Mm,
energy, and and we can't keep up
yeah.
with her. And I'm sure she would love
Yeah.
to talk to teach.
Yeah. Well, any way we can amplify student voices. I mean, I think that's a huge a thing that Break Free tries to do. And I think, if I had to pick a theme today, it would maybe be belonging. I think
Yeah,
a lot of we could do positives and negatives. Like when have you kids could draw art, or write a poem of when was a time you felt you didn't belong versus when was a time you felt you did belong, or what does belonging mean to you, or something like that.
Yeah,
Because I think just knowing some of the student stories that I've had the privilege of hearing, they really struggle to find a space that they belong to. And I think that's such a crucial thing that we as adults, need to make sure if we give these kids any labels, we need to make sure we remember they're kids, right?
yeah.
They're
And
usually
that's
under 21. So they're
that's
just
what the
kids.
gang stuff is about too. Gangs
Yes.
provide a space for belonging in a negative
Yep.
way, but it's still belonging, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, thinking about how belonging can be negative and be positive, and uh, how do what's their role um in whatever group they join. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree.
Adrian and Gus,
okay.
do you guys have anything you want to share, or, comments, feedback, questions? We'd love to hear from you as well.
I'll
Hi,
just
Gus.
say that it's very affirming to hear all of this. My background, I'm with the Multicultural Alliance now, but I'm a retired educator, school
Mm.
administrator also. And before that life, years and years ago, I worked in the juvenile justice system. So
Mm.
um, I'm glad to see that this work is being done and that you do have a space for this because it's really important. And just to kind of emphasize the importance of the restorative practices.
Yeah.
We had those um, in my last school that I worked in, and it's amazing. I almost think it should be, mandated to have students have that
Yes.
time in the classroom to connect with each other and to connect with the teacher. That slide that you put up about the building relationships, they
Mhm.
don't care what you know until they know you care. So,
That's right.
so I think this work is really great, and thank you for doing it and continuing it.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Gus, where are you from?
Yeah, I am in Eastern Washington. I'm an education advocate with the Education Support District. So I work inside of the schools that are embedded within the corrections
Yeah.
programs. And I do apologize. I was kind of like, I have to proctor GED this afternoon. So I was like a little in and out, but I managed to catch some of the presentation. No, I think it's just these webinars are like, especially with events this week that have been discouraging and frustrating. Like it is nice to like have something that's affirming and empowering and reminds us that we are part of something larger and a movement working with these disempowered, marginalized populations. So this was just kind of a nice little a breather to be able to like check in with y'all. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Good.
Yeah, and we have more coming up. We have Merida, who do we have coming up? We have My Hero
So,
is in January.
yes. Mhm.
That's an interesting organization that kids tell stories of heroes in all sorts of multimedia ways. What
We
else?
have Jenny Finn from Spring House. That's
Mm.
intergenerational by learning community in Southwest Virginia. That's next week, coming up
Okay.
on the 14th of November. So I will stick the page for the EdNet so people can register to our future ones.
And we'll have the
Um,
recordings up there too.
we
And
will have
then
the recordings for
Pro Social December. What's Pro Social about?
yes. Pro Social is about a program that's happening here in Monterrey, Mexico. So that's very interesting the way they've developed together with Pro Social Tech University, a whole educational program that they're carrying out here. Mhm. So
And Kayla, this is Patty Williams, and I'm with the charter with the social justice section. And
Oh, great.
yeah, I just thank you so much. I agree with what everybody said, and Gus especially, that somehow this is so uplifting to know this is going on, and we need these stories to remind us that compassion and empathy and support and love and care and concern is going to go on no matter what. So thank you so much for what you have done and are
You're
doing.
welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
and
You're right. Yeah.
You might want to put your LinkedIn link in the chat so people can connect with you. Kayla is also going to present at a conference that I run called GLOW, Global Learning for an Open World. She is a featured speaker, and that's happening November 21st and 20th and 21st online. And the charter is going to be doing more events. We just did a youth conference that went really well, and we're planning to do more kind of online gatherings. We have a great youth coordinator named Anam who is in New Delhi. She's asleep right now, probably. That's why she's not here.
Yeah.
And so I think the future is in our youth, right? And so how do we how do we keep it going, in light of everything. So that's the link to Glow. Anyway, Kayla, you gotta go,
great.
so I will be quiet.
Yes, I have to go. That's okay. I'm so sorry to rush, but I'm going live with our JJ teachers in 4 minutes. So I got to go
Very
get on
good.
to my
Thank you.
other,
Thank you
wear
for
my
being
other
here.
hat.
Thank you, everybody, for
Thanks so
joining
much.
us. And we'll see you next
Thanks so much,
EdNet,
Stephen.
hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, right then.
Excellent. Bye, everyone.